Thank you. My name is Chris Steinocher. I'm President and CEO of the St. Pete Chamber. What I was hoping to do is spend the next 2.5 hours talking a little bit about my summer vacation and then my kids, and then maybe we'll get around to some other things. Is that okay? Is that fair? Everybody's hands are up? All right, good. No, I got about 20 minutes of material. And then, but I'm hoping to tell you a little story about the St. Pete Chamber, how we're doing, but more importantly, because I see you all, and I mean this, as one of the entities in our community that we really need to build strong partnership with, because you guys are a force to be reckoned with. You guys have the pulse of what I think is the most important part of our community, the root of our community, the core of our community, the downtown, and what you guys have done in the last few years with your organization is something that I can learn from as well. So I'm just anxious to grow our partnership together, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So where do I start? So I have been in St. Pete since 1989. Julie and I bought a house in Crescent Heights in '89 because we couldn't afford Hyde Park in Tampa, and we came down here. I came down here from Atlanta. She was from Indiana. We worked with NCR Corporation. I was selling bank systems, and I was competing against Julie, and our bosses didn't know it, so we did never answer the phone. So that's the true love story of us just getting together. But we fell in love with St. Pete back in 1989. We went to the Mainsail Arts Festival and couldn't believe that the city wasn't just packed. We were here, I came from Atlanta, and Atlanta just continued to grow. And Atlanta, when I grew up there in the 70s, was a beautiful southern community, and within 20 years of leaving college there, I didn't want to be near it. It was everything bad about growth. It was everything bad about cement and strip centers and franchises and traffic and waiting in line for whatever. It seems like an eternity for anything. So I found St. Pete, and Julie and I just could not believe that people weren't here. I was like, what is going on here? And so we fell in love with it. We would ride our bikes all around the downtown and throughout the Crescent Lake and Northeast. And then they said, hey, you got to go move back to Atlanta. And I was like, no, I've fallen in love. I'm going to stay here. So when you get a retirement out of NCR after 4 years of work, you blow through that in about 3 months. And but I had a good time. I had a lot of my friends and family down here. And all I would do is drive around downtown with them and go, look how beautiful it is. And finally one of them said, you love St. Pete so much, why don't you work for the St. Pete Chamber? And I was like, that's a great idea. So I went from having a nice professional career to taking a hourly minimum wage job at the St. Pete Chamber, saying, man, I just want to promote St. Pete. I don't care what it is, put me in. I'm a marketing guy. Put me where I can tell the story of St. Pete. So they did. My first gig was I got on a bus, a tour bus, and a group came rolling in, and they all wanted to go see where the movie Cocoon was filmed. So my first thing was like, all right, we're going down the other side of St. Pete, and there's nothing to show you here. We're going to show you that side. And we snuck on the lot where they had filmed it, the little pool area where everybody wanted to see. And so I got the bus driver in trouble because we weren't supposed to pull all the way in and whatever. But I learned from that moment on there was a neat story of St. Pete. And then when you dive into the neat story of the St. Pete, the history of St. Pete and the history of our chamber, then you begin to identify, holy cow, I've got a pretty important job here because I don't want to let this community down. If you pick up any history book of St. Petersburg, and I mean it, pick up any one of them, try this, and pull up a chapter about something that was really important in our community, and you will read that the St. Pete Chamber was part of it. We got started 117 years ago on one wild premise that I don't believe anybody would believe a chamber got built on, and that was there was a gentleman, Mr. Davis, who owned the power company, and that's where the yacht club was, and that was generating 60 watts of power at the time, and it was a lot. Can you imagine 60 watts was lighting up this whole downtown area back then? And he owned the, we'll talk about it some more, but he owned the electric pier at the time when there was the electric pier. And he was lobbying Congress to have it dredged out, and so that he can compete with the port of Tampa for the cargo of cattle and tobacco. And he was trying to talk all the business leaders into, look at all those ships going by, we're missing all this business, aren't we about business, let's get this going. And there were others who came down here 117 years ago for one thing, and that was for their health. And they came here for a different quality of life. They probably had made all their resources already. They really were not interested in making a quick buck. They were more trying to say, I like this place, I want to live here. And it was sold on a premise that Dr. Bieber sold a year before that when he said, come to Pinellas Point, at the point where it was called, where it's the healthiest place in the world to live. He said it was so people started to learn about St. Pete as this just a wonderful fountain of youth. And so here you go, some business leaders and some rich people fighting about our waterfront.
When has that ever happened?
Is that weird? Have we ever, I mean, like, can you imagine? That wouldn't be St. Pete. But anyway, in this story, what happens is a bunch of the, folks who were not supportive of Mr. Davis's dream of having an industrial port at our waterfront said, we want to do something different. So they bought all that land. And they said, we don't want the land. And they created what was called then the Board of Trade, or the Chamber of Commerce at that point. And the Chamber of Commerce then deeded it to the city to never be built on. So from the DNA of our St. Pete Chamber was about, hey, listen, we like business, and business is good, and you got to have a job, and we want prosperity for everybody. But we all are down here for another reason. It's because this is the paradise. This is the place where we all want to be. We all know we're the luckiest people on earth. We've been to other places. We've traveled everywhere. We come back and go, man, I'm glad in St. Pete. Well, these people did as well, and that's what they created the chamber. So our chamber throughout the years, and that's why I do the challenge of the history book, everything that's good about St. Pete, our chamber was in front of. They cared about it. They wanted this grid system that was built off the Chicago plan. They wanted that. They wanted the best of everything. That's why the chamber itself invested in the first flight. They put their own money down on that. They've invested in, and I've got the contract for the first baseball spring training. The chamber put that money out because they wanted to watch baseball. They wanted the quality of life that we all now enjoy. And so that's, when you start looking at the entire history of this, you're like, holy cow, this is a pretty powerful group. In the 20s, during the Great Depression, our chamber took the lead out of any other group in town and created script that I still have some samples of. And we would give our members script to give to their employees so that they can have food to do it. And so we split our staff up. Half the staff was managing the script to get to people so that nobody went hungry. And the other half went up to Washington, D.C. and created a proposal to get something now, which is now called Bay Pines VA Hospital. They had heard that the VA was going to create one VA hospital in Florida, and and I've got the original proposal. We pled because of the pure depression of St. Pete that we need to bring this into St. Pete, and we got that. And that was another. So you just start reading these stories about, holy cow. Because when I grew up, and maybe through college or whatever, I always thought a Chamber of Commerce was kind of and please, if you're one of these people, don't wave your hand right now. I thought it was like this real right-wing Republican, rape and pillage the earth for profit kind of mentality. Did anybody else have that mentality of a chamber? I did, man. So when I was like, but then I saw this chamber and it was promoting Celebrate St. Pete at the time. And I was like, okay, this can't be too bad. And then so in 1989 I joined, and the first meeting I went to because they would give you free lunches in the conference room if you go, and Paul knows about those. And I was hearing about people wanting to get the Vinoy out of mothballs. When I came here, as many of you remember, the Vinoy had a fence around it, boarded up. And there were people just like you and I, which was the wild part of the story, is just like you and I going, what can we do? Who do you know at a bank? How can we get this guy who's already saying he'd put some money up, get him some more money? And so it was people working together that wasn't the mayor, wasn't the city council, wasn't a county commission, wasn't a government entity. It was people. And that was my first civics lesson in, well, maybe the government isn't the way a community is built. Maybe it is the people. And so then the next meeting was about the TROP, at the time the Florida Suncoast Dome, and the top was being put on it. So it wasn't yet having anything to do yet, and there was people just like you and I coming around the table going, how are we going to get, they just got the ding on the Chicago White Sox, and they were looking for another team. How are we going to do this? What can we do? Who do you know at Major League Baseball? And one would raise their hand and go, I know the Major League Commissioner. Let's get on a plane. Let's go talk to him. I know people in San Francisco. So they started to fan out and trying to solve this. And again, not run by anybody saying, why isn't the city doing this for us? Or how come the city's not? And the government should be doing this. It was people like you and I who cared enough to do it. And so at that moment I was hooked. I was like, plug me in. This is neat. I had no idea that you and I could create the community we live in. I just thought we inherited that. I just thought that was what we voted on, and then it became We either liked it or we didn't, but we couldn't actually make a difference in it. And I think what you all feel and what I feel is in St. Pete, we know that. That's in our DNA. We know we are the community. We know we make the difference. And what I see in your organization that I see in mine is a group that's willing to learn about it, study about it, voice their opinion about it, and get behind things that are important to them. And I think that's all we can all do, is because there's not one of you in this room that loves St. Pete more than the next. I mean, we all are having the same love affair right now. We all have the same lover, and she's a wonderful one. And he's a wonderful one. See, we all can personalize it in any way we want, which is cool. We got a thing going on here. So that is the mentality I've brought. So fast forward, so I worked at the chamber and got snatched out of that to do a marketing job because we were wanting to get some money in the house, and got a real job. And then, but then got an opportunity. I worked for Fortune Savings at the time to take it to a commercial bank. We did well there, but then there was somebody saying, hey, we want to promote this whole region, and we're going to bring businesses together to promote Tampa, St. Pete, Clearwater, Sarasota, and Lakeland together. Wouldn't that be cool? I was like, man, I'd love that job. And so I went to the meeting for my boss when I was at the bank, and he came back and goes, what do you think of this? I'm like, I want the job. He goes, well, that's not why I sent you there. I was sent you there to see if we should invest in it or not. I'm like, no, you should invest in it, and I'm going to go get that job. And I went and got that job. So I was the first employee at the what's called the Tampa Bay Partnership, which is a regional economic development group. And so for 17 years, what a long, strange trip that was. I got to spend 17 years in and out of every community in Tampa Bay, from Pasco County and Polk County and Manatee and Sarasota and Pinellas and Hillsborough, and I got to learn about their economic development strategies, what's going to make them, what their future was, how they were recruiting businesses, how they were working with their education, how they were working with their neighborhoods and community. So I got to help them write their economic development strategies, and then I was able to weave them all together, and that's what I went out and pitched, that here's this community that has these assets, this vision, this dream. And I got to do that across the world. I got to travel with folks like Jeb Bush and others, and go to Europe and tell this story and try to bring businesses back here, try to bring money from Tallahassee and DC back here. And it was a blast. And we have made a lot of progress in getting Tampa, St. Pete, Clearwater, and all those people to work together. I'm not sure the brand Tampa Bay still works for everybody, because I think everybody still has a home, and our home isn't Tampa Bay, it's St. Pete. So the brand name might not be the same, but the cooperation of all these assets, as much as we love to stay in downtown St. Pete every once in a while, we probably go take a plane ride out of Tampa International Airport. We probably use maybe Tampa International Mall once or twice a year. So there's still some value in having neighbors close to you that have wonderful things too. It's always great to borrow some tools from the neighbors, right? So that's what I got to do. But then 4 years ago, I got this chance where they said, hey, the CEO job's available. I'm like, man, I'd love that. And then I was like, I'm going to go do that. And then you pull out your old resume file that you have somewhere in your drawer somewhere. And I look back, and I literally 20 years prior had said, when you put together your dream list, that I wanted to be the president and CEO of the St. Pete Chamber. So I came full circle, and I did. And now the part of this story I want you to remember is be careful what you wish for, because it just might happen. So I just went blindly into this. I was like, yeah, I got my dream job, Julie. Hey, man, I got it. And then, and the first day, literally the first day, Governor Scott was coming in, and I got to host him, and we had a big meeting at the Trop, and it was just a blast. I'm like, man, this is cool. I'm the president of the chamber. And then I went back to my office, and I was like, give me some financials so I can really get into this. And the lady looks at me, and she goes, which financials do you want? I'm like, what do you mean? And she goes, well, the ones they showed you are the ones that I use. I'm like, holy shit, what do you mean by that? I was like, what? And she goes, well, they really probably haven't told you everything. I'm like, well, close the door, sit down, tell me everything. And then I learned that, as Paul alluded to it, we were morally, spiritually, financially bankrupt. We literally didn't have enough money to pay me, let alone anybody, the staff, and I had over 20 staff members at that time. We had outstanding liens on everything. We had used our last equity line to pay for the last month's bills, and so we were just, so here's the one, story for these young folks in the back about due diligence, taking your next job. Ask some questions before you jump on a job. And so I was like, holy cow, what do we do? So I called a board meeting, and I asked the question, because St. Pete at that time, if you think 2011, things were starting to really come around. I asked the question, I go, do we need a Chamber of Commerce? Why do we need one? It's 2011. People are starting to move here. Condos are coming up. Things are happening. We're dead anyway. Sounds like we've been dead for a while. Why do you need a chamber of commerce? I said, am I here to put it to sleep? And because I got to make some calls and go get my job back. And they're like, and so we went around the table and we had this conversation about what should a chamber do, and then I told them what I thought I was hired to do, which was what I read in the history books and what I saw for myself in 1989 and 90, which was I thought we cared about this community. I thought we were the ones that could show a path forward in difficult times and in wonderful times, that we were going to do that. I don't know why we're selling coffee table books. I don't know why we're doing some of this stuff just to generate revenue. It's not about generating revenue. It's about getting people on the bus together. It's about everybody sharing some kind of common interest in moving forward. If we keep moving forward and we keep an interest that we all love, St. Pete, maybe we can make some progress. So everyone was like, yeah, I want that too, and so let's get going. And so we went on this journey about really just making sure we got back to our roots, and that literally is where we're at today. So we are trying to do a couple things right. We do three things. We handle our members. So part of what I'm really focused on is just making sure if you're a member that I'm doing something for you somehow, some way, whether we're connecting you, whether we're promoting you, whether we're just understanding you, whether we're plugging you in, whether you feel like you have a voice or not, you can come to the chamber and have that voice. There's an instant pluggability, and so we try to really focus on our members and the organization. I never ever want to hand off this trip to someone and have them see the financials that we saw. So I want to keep us strong and financially viable. And so a little part of that story is when I found out, I go, well, how many members do we have? Because they had the book of lists that they used to recruit me, and it had our St. Pete Chamber as the largest chamber, 2,400 members. And when I asked the accountant, she goes, no, we have probably a lot less than that. I'm like, okay, well, give me a complete readout. Did it, and at the very bottom where it totals, it was 666. It was the total number. And so when I said that to the board, and they go, well, you can't say that, you need to see 667. I'm like, no. That's what got us into this problem the first time, is like, let's go get another member, then we can say that. But we're not fudging any more numbers. We learned that's probably not a good strategy. So I just always want to, I feel like we owe it to be a strong chamber. And I don't want to be the biggest one in the country or the region. I want to be the best one on my block. And that's really all I can ask for. So we're focused on that. And the other two things we're focused on are our advocacy efforts and our economic development efforts. And our advocacy efforts are the same ones you guys are focused on, because it does impact your quality of life as well. But we're focused on kind of three tiers of issues, those big, hairy issues that are going to be there whether you and I are going to be alive or not. There are things like transportation. It's why I got involved and was one of the co-chairs of the Green Light Pinellas effort. I really thought our community needs to be connected a little bit better. I really would have loved, I just came back from Chicago, would have loved to take in the train from here to the airport and not have to pay $80 in parking on my way back out of there. So we are really looking at the big issues of education and transportation and the like. So those are big, hairy issues that we're never going to solve. They'll be part of our lifetime. The second one are those big, hairy issues that maybe, just maybe, in our lifetime, we'll see resolution to them, like the Pier that got another vote of resolution today by City Council, or like maybe the Tampa Bay Rays and the baseball situation. Maybe in your and I lifetime we'll know what happens next on that. And so we're working on those issues and the downtown waterfront master plan, which you all actually helped start the whole process, and thank you for that. So there is some of the synergies we have there. And then the third one are those ones that come up that City Council and somebody brings up, and then all of a sudden there's a fire drill, and that can be the noise ordinances that we're all working on, or the historic ordinances, just any of these kind of different issues where it tends to be more localized, only impacts just a smaller group of folks, not the entire community, but something just so as important. So that's how we've divvied them up. We have a council for each one, and we meet regularly, and then we feed all that in to the board where the positions are taken and adhered to, and we get to go speak for them. I am amazed how many people we've got working in those different task force. Each task force has 20, 30, 40 members, and they feed into a public policy council that has 40 plus members into our board. So we have got a lot of people getting interested in these subjects. And that's why, and I know you all are too. And the final piece is economic development. I really believe part of this whole thing is jobs do help pay for everything. It's good to have a job. And in St. Pete, while we love our art and beer, every once in a while we want someone to pay for the art and beer, right? So you want people with jobs to do that. And I really believe now, being after the last 17 years of recruiting companies in this area, we have the best story to tell in the world. We can really help our small businesses grow. We can help those who are already here grow, but we can also bring the right people here. And we're starting to see that right now. We're starting with the recent successes in our downtown core of some major headquarters relocating here. People want what you and I have. They really do, right? They want this livable, walkable, scalable community. St. Pete has one thing in favor of it, and that's the scale. You can get around here. We were just in Chicago, built on the same plan, but just bigger scale, right? So it's a little harder to get around. Still beautiful and wonderful in the waterfront park, and everything works really well for it, but the scale in St. Pete is magic because of these neighborhoods all around it. And so we are really working on how do you do economic development when you have a wonderful product that you just don't want to, again, rape and pillage. You want to make sure you find the right group. So we're doing something called Grow Smarter. And we tested Grow Crazy. Nobody wanted to test and wanted to do Grow Crazy. And because that's what a lot of communities do. They just grow for growth's sake. So we're doing something called Grow Smarter. And in fact, at the City Council meeting today, we presented it to City Council with unanimous support. First of all, unanimous support at City Council. I know. All of them. And they were all there. No, absolutely. Mr. Newton was there, man. I was like, no. I was like, really? You know, and because I think right now everybody understands it's the right thing to do. It's a public-private partnership. It's something Paul and I and Dan and others have worked on for quite a while now is just are we making sure we're putting all the pieces together? Do our districts understand how jobs are going to impact us? Does the 2020 plan understand how to work well together? Does the Skyway Marina District and all the pieces come together? We go tell that story, and we go find those kind of companies that fit. And we found 5 different sectors that if you and I focused, if we put a buck down on those 5 sectors, we can tell the best story, and we probably can hit some home runs with it. So we've identified what's called 5 clusters, and you guys can probably guess them, but the first one is marine and life sciences. We know we've got a competitive advantage on that. And there's something called location quotients. So we did this study that gave us location quotients, and if you have a 1, you're national average. And on any of these that we've picked, we had 2, 3, or 4, which means we have twice, 3 times, or 4 times as many people working in that industry or field. And so that's what we did is we looked at our entire St. Pete Pinellas community and said, what are we good at? So not only what are the logos that we have on the buildings, but also what are the people doing inside all those cubes inside those buildings. And so we've got a neat study that we can show anybody saying, we know how many software analysts we have in town. We know how many financial planners we have. We can tell people exactly what they need if they're going to cite their business here. Well, can I compete for talent here? And is this the right kind of environment for me? So we've identified those. So marine and life sciences is number 1. The second one is financial services. Third one is data analytics. Fourth one is specialized manufacturing. And fifth one is arts and design. So we feel like if we focused on those, began to definitely support the entrepreneur who's in that environment and the current businesses that are here, and then begin to selectively tell the other businesses around the world that that's the kind of environment we're trying to create, we're going to bring more of that here. Because I really do believe while we want residential and retail and hospitality here, you want some people working here during the day too, because they're going to help pay some of the bills that we all are going to want to have, and they're going to create another vibrancy that you probably want in your downtown and throughout. So we're focused on that plan, and that's called Grow Smarter. We're going to be kicking that off here in the fall, and the city has just said that they'd be a partner in that, and they gave us unanimous support today. So we are working on that 3 things: making sure we're creating jobs, making sure we're creating a strong voice, and making sure I never let these members get behind and make sure that they're always in front of what we're up to and doing it the right way. And I've got an active board. Dan Saginero is leading my marketing committee. I thank you for your support. Paul Carter's my strategic advisor, as I call him, so he's in every meeting with me. You go through Paul if you want to come to me. He's the guy. He's my consigliere. and it's working well for us. So that's it. So I thought maybe if we wanted to, we could have a discussion on, and I know we're running out of time, any of the issues that are most concerning to you all, whether it's the 85 acres at the stadium, the pier, the waterfront plan. Let me get before I open that up, so the pier, City Council 7-1 voted to demolish the pier and to hire the architects. Can I get a show of hands of who thinks that was a good thing? Is there? All right, good. Okay. So that's almost that's a lot of people, right? I'm not a scientific major, but I would say that's good amount of people. I thought it was a great thing too. I just wanted to move forward. It's just time to move forward, guys. And I was up in Chicago at this Millennial Park, and I'm sure most of you have been too. But holy crap, that was a blast, man! And there were people just there and just wanting to be there. And if you don't think you need to do, again, if you think you need to really have everything programmed for people, you're nuts, man. You can let people program it themselves if they just have the environment that you've created for them. So I'm anxious and excited for the next steps on that. But what would you guys like to talk about with the time we have remaining? Anything? No hands? I'm kidding.
What was it about Millennial Park that would be a benefit to do here in St. Pete? What did you learn?
I really thought the active use of art in the environment was really important. So the bean and the water spouts, and I don't know what the name of that one was, but I think people just could interact with the art. So they were playfully playing with it, taking pictures, walking around, splashing in it, but it was still major art installations, right? I mean, so to me, I was like, boy, we should think of that scale. We should really say, in these parks, we want some active art, because that's what I think St. Pete really has become, but also a place where people can just play with it. There were kids playing with the art and not knowing that that was art they were really playing with.
They also have a lot of festivals and concert series and everything throughout the year too.
Absolutely.
Lollapalooza gets like tens of thousands.
Yeah, and it's the only place they do it now, right? Yeah.
Just had a big Grateful Dead concert up there.
Did they? Yeah.
Oh yeah, you have heard of that?
Yeah.
Hear about that?
That's where I just came back from.
Could you speak to the one area that I think we're possibly at cross purposes, and that is for those of us who live in the high-rise downtown, high-rises, and the businesses that are serving liquor till 3 a.m., the noise ordinance and the sort of issue of trying to peacefully coexist seems to be pretty challenging. How are you seeing that?
Yeah, it is a major challenge, and we can't split up on this one, guys. We've got to figure it out together because, first of all, I personally in the chamber understand how important residential is, and I've been at all these meetings, and I really, I don't live downtown. I live in Crescent Lake, but I can tell it's an issue, right? I mean, this isn't something being made up. This is people who care about our community who are being just bothered. And I also believe there are some clubs in town that are just bad apples. And so I think what we've settled on is, first of all, we've just got to start enforcing some of this, first of all. Before we create any new rules, enforce what's already there, and I don't think it's being enforced, and now it's starting to be enforced. So part of it is we're a very laid-back community. We're allowing these doors to be open and the music to be blared out. I don't think that's fair. So part of it is, I think all business cares about is, tell me what the rules are, and I'll operate within those rules. Those who don't care about the rules and are in business, we don't care about that. You've got to play by the rules. That is part of it's just fair. So I think where this is going is, and I knew it was going that way when, if you ever knew Matt Donahue at the Push, who left town a couple years ago, he was always going, Chris, and he was a good guy. He went back up to Boston, and he goes, I see a train wreck coming. He goes, because we are not, we don't have a wet zoning area where these people are coming in. He goes, you're going to get a lot of cowboys in town who are going to operate clubs for the buck and not care about the community, and you're going to find yourself at wit's end with just these problems. So I think it's behooving about all of us to stay at the table and make sure we understand that we care about residents and we care about rules, and we don't want to give up what the residents bring, and we want to support good business as well. And I think there's somewhere in the middle. I love going to shows at Janus, but I hate it, but I know I understand it when they shut off at 11 or 12, whatever time that is during that day. There might be a great show going on, and all of a sudden they cut it off. So there's some good partners who are like, cut it off. There are others where you're like, you walk by the place and you're like, holy shit, what the hell are they doing in there? So I get it, and I really do think, though, it's gonna be this maturation of making sure those who come into our town that are operating clubs and businesses just understand the rules and that we enforce the rules. I don't want to run any, you know, you can say this with the Rays or anything. I believe we don't want to lose any element of what we have right now, because I really believe we have a wonderful soup called St. Pete. And it's tasty mommy's soup, right? It's just the best thing ever. And I don't want to plug out one piece of that saying, well, we don't need the Rays, or we don't need this music, or we don't need residential. Man, don't mess with any of this thing, man. This is going the right way. Let's coddle it, protect it, and then grow it smartly about each one of these things, because we're going to have more residents. You don't think that one building is going to have problems with the ringside issue and whatever? I mean, come on, man, it's coming. You know it's coming, so the rules got to get in place so that those who are willing to operate under those rules can learn how to make profit on that as well, because you want them to be profitable. You want those, because you want streets to have people on them. The safest streets are those with people on them, right? So we don't want people to go back out off the streets, but we just want to do it, and we want to get them off the streets and in bed at a reasonable time. So I'm with you guys, man. I'm getting old to the point of like, hey, man, let's just shut it off. Go inside, crank it, but close the doors, man.
Chris, can you talk about the historic ordinance that's being proposed by City Council?
Yeah, so if everybody up to speed on the historic ordinance, if you care about your property rights, I think you ought to pay attention to this one, because they're updating the ordinances that were created in 1986, and we're monitoring them closely, because there's some properties that are on a list that may or may not be historic, so we're watching to see. What we're trying to do is make sure that this is a community where, again, your investment is just certain of what it can be and what it can't be. You understand how to make money here or not. And I think some of the things they're about to interject into the historic ordinance is this changing how how neighborhoods or business districts can be named historic. Right now, by the law, it's 66% of the property owners have to say, yeah, you know what, I want my neighborhood or my area to be known as a historic district. And then you vote on it. If you get 66% of the property owners, you become historic. 3 of our neighborhoods are currently under that designation, but then they're trying to they're going to change it to go 50+1 of those who vote for something to make so someone, you could be out of town, literally, and so you can come back and say our place is historic now, and you can't do these certain things. You're like, wait a second, man, you know. America's about property rights, buddy. You know, you're starting to say, yeah, I'm going to have to do what with mine now? What do what? And so I think I don't think we should make changes in how we own our property easy. I think we should make them fair, but not easy. And so that's one where we're trying to fight, saying, I don't believe, I've seen how many of these elections work that way. We don't want to do it that way. Let's keep that the way it is. Let's protect our property rights. So the historic designation stuff, to me, most of it is right, because most of us love the historic stuff. I mean, there's none of us that go, I don't want that. You know, you don't go to Boston and go, crap, I don't want to go take the Freedom Trail. That's a bunch of crap. No, man, you want to go see that stuff. And in St. Pete, there's still some things that are very historic we want to preserve. I mean, it's got that feel to it. But then just because you're old doesn't mean you're historic, right? I mean, so part of this is let's make sure we just designate the right things. And I'm for, right now there's a list called potentially eligible. I'm like, put the list together. Let's all agree either these properties are historic or they're not, and let's move on with it. And stop putting people in limbo going, well, if you buy it, they might say it's historic. Well, shouldn't we know that by now? Isn't there somebody that can go, yeah, that one's historic, yeah, that one is, no, you're not, sorry. Let's just get on with it so there's some certainty. I love certainty in those kind of environments.
I'm curious about downtown and recruiting companies into the downtown market. The challenges that the chamber has to deal with, and where the quality of the education comes into play in attracting companies into this market.
Yep, so great question. The first part about it is we're starting to run out of space for the major relocation. So eventually we're going to have to build another building. And whether that's on the 85 acres or near that area, because there's not many places left downtown core that we can do it, and there's still 1 or 2, but so we're filling up our space pretty rapidly right now with these last couple. I'm most nervous about when are we going to get, we're going to have to build another tower of some sort for office because people want St. Pete. The best part is we have, literally we have people calling us wanting to. When I was at City Council, I actually read it. If you watch the video, I got an email while I was on the podium from somebody saying, hey, I talked to you 6 months ago about my cyber tech business out of Colorado Springs. I really do want to move here now. Can you help me move our company's headquarters to downtown St. Pete? So I mean, so it's fun fishing, but now it's going to be harder to place them in the right place. So that's one of it. The education thing is a wild one, and that's something I've dealt with throughout my career in economic development recruiting. Is first of all, everybody from the Northeast and Midwest think anywhere in the South education sucks. They don't picture us any different than many other places in the South that they're considering for their corporate relocation, that they just know that in Boston or Chicago or wherever they were from, they've got the best education, okay? So we're never gonna win that one. But when we did this study recently, we looked at the education, and the wild part was we actually aren't doing as bad as people think. When we surveyed 1,500 residents about education during this study, and then we looked at the complete, opposite thing going here. That the people who live here think education's a real problem, and then when we put up the numbers and the superlatives, St. Pete and Pinellas County actually has a lot of great things going for it. They really do. And now, do they have some issues to work on? Absolutely. Every system does. But I know my kids have gone through the public school system, and we've been more than pleased with the results. It's different. So the hardest part of the recruitment to tell anybody is they go, well, where should I live so I get in the right school? Because that's pretty much how how real estate was always played. Is okay, if you're in that neighborhood, you get to that nice school. Well, here in Pinellas County, it's like it does not matter where you live, because you get one of these magic lotto tickets, and you get the number to go to the magnet school of your choice or the charter school of your choice. Because my kids went to Perkins Elementary for the arts, which is in South St. Pete. One went to Sanderlin IB for middle school. One went to Thorogood, Marshall Fundamental, and so that wasn't my neighborhood school. So that is the hardest part to explain to anybody coming from the north. They're like, what do you mean? How does that work? So I'm not a big fan of that for a lot of reasons. I think it breaks up neighborhoods in a hard way, and kids, like my kids, don't know their neighborhood kids because they don't go to school with them. So I think there's some problems. But overall, when we're selling it, we show them the facts, which are our graduation rates are better. The second grade reading rates in Florida are better than anywhere else in the country. So you start to really, you look for the shiny points of any sale, and we've got enough of them where people are like, okay, well, it's not that bad. And oh, by the way, I'm going to put my kid in private anyway. I'm worried about some of these other people. And we have enough good stories, and where we can tell people, you're not going to a third world country here. This is America. We still have good education wherever you kind of go. It's this perception of what, where I grew up.
Where's this, obviously they're going to take the bus hub out of Williams Park. I've heard some ideas bandied about where that's going to be. Where would that be? Where would be a good place for that? And how do we not have that same type of entertainment to that area all over again? Like, I know there's some talk like the cheese grater building, as they call it.
Yeah, they're talking about that. What I'm trying to explain to them, and what even PSTA is trying to explain to the city, is I don't think we need that anymore. We don't need a bus depot. If you go to Chicago right now, you don't go to the bus depot to go get a bus. You just wait in the corner. Here it comes, and you get on. That's what we want, right? We don't want to just move the problem 3 blocks away or 5 blocks. That's, very similar to the homeless. Let's just move it away. So it's not, well, it's still, now it's in my neighborhood. Now it's in your neighborhood. What are you doing there? So part of this is commit to the grid system. Just commit to it, and then you can figure, and it can work. But you have to invest in it. So we have to be willing to say that's what we want. And right now, St. Pete, because of that vote, PSTA has got comfortability that we can do that. We haven't got everybody there yet, because in that same amount of time, people are working on this bus depot notion, and we got to move it. There's 3 magic areas in downtown where that's going to be. I'm trying to tell people, why spend that $35 million on making the grid system work even better? Don't move the problem, please. So that's why we work on that issue every day.
Chris, is the enforcement issue lack of police? You say like the park is closed, you can't come in after sundown. I mean, is it that,
It's not the lack of police. I think it's a lot of things. First of all, it's the pure volume of people, and it is enforcing rules a lot. But then also there are people that are just that just want to break the rules too, and that's what I've seen. I've seen there are people that with mental illnesses and addictions, but there is so much help for those people. I mean, we have so many providers in our community that are willing to help. There are people that get lost in this system too, and I guess if you spend enough time on the street, like one of the gentlemen that I know, you lose all reason for some reason. And I think so we have to treat everybody human, give them the benefit of the doubt, but also just know that, hey, it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you can't be walking around with a beer. I'm sorry, you and I work, we follow the rules, you got to follow rules too. And part of this is we function best when we just have rules that we enforce, and we don't always have to agree on them, but we know what the rules are. And I think that's part of the issue right now. We're just not enforcing all the rules.
Who's responsible for enforcing those rules?
yeah, it's the
Police?
Yeah, I think so. I think it is the sheriff and the police, and they're working together, and they are. That's the wildest part. It's just it's a volume issue. It literally is a harder issue to deal with. And I thought I could go in there and go, well, just whatever, and you like, holy crap, you do that every day? I had no idea. Like it's an amazing learning curve that we all should take the class so that we all have a little bit better eyes when we're watching this one.
Chris, just to your point there, police at our association meeting a couple neighborhoods away recently said that we have the same number of police today that we did 30 years ago.
Wow.
And it's a matter of resources.
Yeah, it's a resource issue. Yep. And I got to tell you, I love our new police chief. He's on the right track with everything he's doing. He gets it. He's an old kind of vice guy anyway. He's a enforcer, man. He's be careful when you're meeting with him. He's a straight up dude, man. Yeah. He's a very, very wonderful, and I know he'll figure this one out because he cares. And the sheriff's on this board that I'm on as well. So the wildest part is everybody cares. It's a hard issue and a very expensive issue to deal with, especially if you think about it. People and this is literally true because we did all this, is the Greyhound bus drivers say, where are you going? They go, I don't have any money. We'll take you down to St. Pete. People are just dropping people off here. And so every day, the problem creates itself again. So, but there's a lot of chronic too.
So there are a lot of people that go to and from Williams Park because they work downtown, but they don't live downtown. And unfortunately, they're subject to all of this when they get there. So I think the grid system is fantastic. I think it'll be more efficient. And I think it's also going to make it a more pleasant experience for people to commute and use public transportation. And you having been involved in Greenlight Pinellas, I know that was really a part of it was making it a more comfortable experience. So are you happy with what they're talking about so far with the grid system and the many facilities that they might have money to build, or?
Yeah, so it's moving in the right direction, first of all. And I really believe it's what we as a city paint for PSTA, and that's why I think we all ought to get more active in it. I don't think it's there yet, but first of all, it's moving in the right direction, and it is about making it more usable. So when I was part of the Greenlight effort, I actually rode the bus from Crescent Lake downtown, and I would literally be amazed. You're sitting at the bus stop, which is just literally, so you're baking in the sun, right? There's no protection or whatever, but it's a bus stop. You sit there, and people will drive up to you and go, Chris, are you all right? Do you need a ride? I'm like, no, I'm just riding the bus. So I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. No, I want to. It's easy. Look, so part of this is a whole mentality thing. But yeah, so making it just desirable, interesting, and so when we were in Chicago, we thought nothing of getting on the bus or whatever. You're like, well, that's how I get around. Yeah. It's not a poor person's thing. It's a moving thing. And here in the South, especially, but down here in Florida, it's like, oh, you poor thing, you ride the bus. I feel bad for you. And it's like, no, man, I'm trying to be more efficient, and so I don't know if it'll get there in our lifetime, but I know all the studies show that millennials don't want to drive. They don't want to have cars. Like you and I were all fascinated with getting our first car, and we couldn't wait. And Now kids are waiting a lot longer and are not as interested in that. So if we don't, and that's what I was worried about, is if we don't get this, when we look back in 20 years from now and wonder why people aren't moving to St. Pete and they're moving to all these other communities and there's nobody taking care of me, I'm going to be upset, man, because then I was like, damn, we knew people wanted this and it's easier. And do we really, we know we're going to get more people, do we really want to fill our roads with more people? I mean, what I love about St. Pete is there's not a lot of traffic here. But you hear that? That's people coming to St. Pete, and they're not going to stop. So part of this is let's get ready for it.
With all the new business that's coming downtown too, that means more more people working downtown, but not everyone can live there.
Right, not everyone can live there, not everyone can park downtown too, right? So do we want to build parking decks in our downtown prime spot? Obviously not, right? So part of it is, well, people will take alternatives if they're efficient. And then when I was on the bus, I was like, man, this is, it's not, it's nice. Like you can actually return emails and stuff. So, and although I see some of you doing that driving, so one.
As it relates to transportation, there's a lot of talk about the future of Uber, and I wanted to know what the chamber's position on it is. I just read an article this week about how they're working with Tesla to put something like 20 million autonomous cars on the road. This would solve a lot of the issues of traffic, parking, wrecks, drinking and driving. A lot of these public transportation. What's the chamber's take on that? Or I mean, I assume we're different than Tampa has been so far in Uber?
Yeah, so luckily we have a different structure than Hillsborough does about how they can handle Uber. So I'll answer the Uber question as well as the driverless car piece because we're looking into both. But when I was a kid, I was promised that the Jetsons car was going to happen in my lifetime, and it never did. So some of this I'm like, all right, whatever. But I still want my want my Jetson car. But anyway, so the chamber's taking a position on Uber. We want Uber as long as there are rules that and that our taxi cab members that are members as well have similar rules to play the game. So part of this is you can't create an unfair advantage for somebody and not tell the other group, okay, well now we got to revisit yours. So we wanted a sweeping change of all the ordinances of how, because it's an expensive issue for a taxi cab to do a taxi cab. But
also join Uber for free.
They can also join Uber for free. So part of this is helping them, and that's what we're trying to do, is help them understand how to compete. But they've already got an investment into this, so part of this is how do you get their investment back out? But then, so we're on the, Hillsborough's fighting it. We're like, we want it to work. And in fact, Uber joined the chamber. It's the first chamber it joined, and it actually, if you join, you get a $20 off your first Uber ride with the chamber. So we're part of that support of it. It's hard to tell a cab member that we're not supportive of them. We are supportive of them. You really want, like even in Chicago again, we took Uber, we took cabs. You want both. A great communities want it all, man. And that's what I'm saying. Don't mess with the soup. Just add, play with the ingredients a little bit. Don't take any piece out. So you want cabs on the street. You want to be able to walk out and go, I need a ride. Or you want to be able to do that with it. And so great community. So again, just like this noise issue and residents and bars, you want Uber and taxi cabs to have the best environment. And what I believe the ordinance that they're recrafting actually helps create an environment for both to operate. And that's what you really, really want, man. Anything else?
Are you saying that the Uber, this is the first chamber
that they told me about? Yeah, because they haven't. Yeah. I don't know if it's in the nation. I know around here, I know that the person who handles Florida, I go, man, join the chamber. They're like, we don't do that. I'm like, you should. Have you been part of it? But yeah, they're a member of the chamber, St. Pete Chamber. I was proud of that one.
Sorry before you touched on like St. Pete growing smart, as opposed to this growing crazy. I guess like transportation, homeless, I think like these are all big problems. One thing that can easily change overnight is like the development of like retail and how we want our actual downtown to sort of expand or sort of like grow. What's the big picture for the chamber? Like, do they want to see like streets and streets of thriving, like cafes, bars and restaurants, or are they just content keeping it where it is? Like, is there a big goal or strategy or like the dream that the chamber kind of has envisioned for downtown?
Yeah, that's a great question. As far as no, we haven't painted that. What does success look like? No, I don't think a community can ever do that. I know what we want is we want economic prosperity for all. So we're calling it inclusive prosperity. So I'm not done until everybody enjoys in this. Because if some of us are and others aren't, then that's not prosperity right there. So part of it is we're trying to make sure that everybody this prosperity we're feeling right now touches everybody. So I don't think it's the density of the energy we have, but making sure it's in the scale that works for St. Pete. So scale is really important to us right now still. But if you think about it and you look back at the history of St. Pete, there were a lot more people living in St. Pete in the 20s and 30s than there are today, man. And so we can handle more now. That's scary to a lot of people. So we're not done growing yet. And do I envision that every block in the future is going to be taken up by something? Absolutely, because people are smart and they want to be here. And so painting that notion of what we stand for, the values are more important to me than what that and I like painting something like that, but I think right now it's more about the values we're trying to grow with than the kind of growth.
Because one interesting thing that I find, I've traveled to a lot of places and I'm actually from Australia, and so when I meet people and they're telling me, oh, they can't wait to leave St. Pete, and I'm like, you're crazy, I just moved halfway around the world to actually live here.
Yeah.
So I could relate to a lot of the stories you're telling before.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I found so fascinating, I guess, about downtown is it's not like any other downtown that I've sort of been to that's been a thriving downtown. And it makes me think two things. So one of my biggest things is how broken up downtown is. So we've got this whole beach drive, it's immaculate. It's, but it doesn't really sort of join to anything. And then you've got this downtown stretch of bars and cafes and nightlife, and it doesn't sort of really connect to anything. And now you've got the Bay Walk, which kind of I was always sort of thinking maybe if somehow is everyone familiar with Lincoln Road Mall in South?
There you go. Yeah.
That street was dead. That was in one of the most popular tourist meccas in the world, and this street was dead. All of a sudden they put a few more pavers in there, then all of a sudden this vibrant downtown mall just appeared out of nowhere. And I always thought something that from Central to Beach Drive would be phenomenal. So that way it almost ties the whole what St. Pete's got to offer together.
Yeah, we call that, we did a study with a group called Urban Land Institute before the Downtown Waterfront Master Plan got started, and they looked actually coming in and looking at it, and they called those the missing teeth, where you want a vibrant downtown where if you can't see what's next, you're probably not going to walk down there. So a good example right now is you're at the end of Beach Drive and you look up where the one building's going to be, and you kind of see something there, but you're like, that's a lot of darkness there. I ain't going over there. And you'll turn around, and you can watch people turn around and they'll head back that way. So what you want to do is always keep it so that you're at least, I can see what's there now. I'll walk there and then I'll keep my exploration going. But if you have the missing teeth, you don't have a pretty smile. And so part of this is, I do believe you're going to see those missing teeth come in a really nice way for everybody. But I think there are a lot of, that's the best part of this. We're not done yet, man, and everybody can be part of it. Thanks for coming here, man. Beautiful.
I don't know whether everybody has stayed away purposely from the topic of our beloved floundering rays, but what is the council's position on what to do with, or what is the chamber's position on what to do with this inept council that will not make up its mind one way or the other?
Well, first of all, I think they ought to put me in at second base, so that's number one. I'm sparky. I can do this. I'm kidding. But so we have taken a position. First of all, we believe stalemate is not good for anything. So we want to get off stalemate in a big way. That's why we're supportive of having the Rays and the city come to some agreement. I am not afraid to compete. I really am not. I really believe the best thing we could start doing is talking about, so what we say, no stalemate, get people back to the table. Let's start talking about the 85 acres and other places in St. Pete that the Rays may be successful. So let's just start looking at the future, saying they're in our future, and we want you here. And if you want me to dance for it, man, I will dance for it, because I can show you we can compete. I think we have the best story to tell in this market still. I really do believe we can do that. And oh, by the way, if we don't compete, if we compete and don't win, it's okay. It's okay, guys. We'll get through this one together. But part of this is, I believe we can compete. So we're talking about, let's get through with a stalemate, and let's start working on, can you imagine if you were the Rays right now and you had 50% development rights on 85 acres, why you would not think that that's a pretty good part of a deal that you should be taking advantage of. That's why the Atlanta Braves moved to Cobb County, was they got development rights around that, and what they're putting in is everything you could eat and drink around it to hang out there. And I know they're closer to fans over there as well, but I really do believe it's about a development deal as well. So I really think, the Chamber's position is stalemate, let's stop this, but also let's start getting ready to compete. So it's really important to me is if there's opportunities at Derby Lane or over at Carolina or what's called Toyland or Toy Town on the 275, that big open lot there, if those are real opportunities, let's start drawing them up, guys, and start wooing the Rays again like we did all these years ago. Let's start wooing them, but let's start preparing it. Let's understand it. I think we're in the best position in Pinellas County. Our TDC just approved a 6-cent hotel tax that's going to provide money for the 3rd and 4th cent to be used towards capital development deals. Hillsborough doesn't have that. And who in their right mind would drive over that bridge at 6 o'clock at night to go do anything? Anybody? You? No? Oh, you were, right? Okay.
Once or twice a year.
So I think we can compete. I think we're going to do it. I think it's inevitable that they strike that something's going to happen because the Rays are going to have to start looking anyway. So we have got to be a great partner of theirs. The coolest part of this story is, and this doesn't get the press, but I get a chance to be part of it, is Brian Calt, the president now, is a St. Pete guy who's got a young family here. And if you think about the president, CEO of an organization saying, I work and live 2 miles away, and my family's here, it's easy, I don't want to go anywhere. And if we go out of town, I'm going to lose my gig. You know how good of a gig this is? So he really wants St. Pete to work. He really does. And I've never seen that in their eyes before, where they're like, you really know that group wants this to work. They really do. And when you go to the game and you look around going, man, this ain't working right now. I believe, and the real problem with this is the business community is not supporting the Rays. Not just St. Pete, the entire region. 70% of our season tickets are by residents, not by businesses. Every other community is completely flip-flop. So you and I will go home tonight, and you maybe see the Chicago White Sox or Detroit, or maybe not Detroit, but some of these other markets, and you'll see as many people as are at the Rays game, and you're like, well, how are they announcing 30,000 people? And a lot of it is businesses are they're just used to they have a line item on their pro forma for their budget every year. They know they got to pay for the baseball team every year. And in Tampa Bay, people are like, well, nobody's going to go to those games. You're like, cut the check. If you want to be a major league market, cut the check, give away the tickets to every school in town. When I was straight A's, I got Atlanta Braves tickets. I know that it works. So I think part of this is knowing how to be a major league town is investing in it the right way. And if we don't want to be that, that's fine. But if you do, you have to belly up on it. And not the residents, but the businesses. All right, are we out of time almost, or one more?
Don't you think the Rays are more to blame than anybody about why the business community hasn't invested in St. Pete? I mean, they have cried sour grapes ever since the Sale Stadium, the Major League Downtown in 2007, 2008. They're not, when they threaten to leave all the time, when they blame us for not showing up, when they only 300 season ticket holders in St. Pete, when they don't re-sign star players, when it seems like there's a...
You're making a good case for it.
There's kind of the other thing where the Rays themselves make people not care. So it's like...
Yeah, I wonder. You can make a great case for it.
So.
Yeah, and thank you. And so you can make a great case for it. I really believe that in every relationship, 50% of everything is on both sides. So while I agree that maybe that you feel, and I agree that I feel that maybe they haven't done everything right, I wonder what we haven't done right too. I really do. I know that's hard to say because you really want to go, that's them, man, it's them. And you're like, well, wait a second, it's us, it's all of us. There's something not working here. And if you always say to the person in your relationship, well, it's you, I'm perfect, you're like, well, you know what, you're going to be alone a lot. So,
That's what's going on.
But I don't disagree with your points, man. They're good points.
There's no doubt the mistakes were made 7 years ago, and by both sides, and maybe the Rays jumped the gun and they waited a little bit. Maybe they would have had a different response.
Man, if I was at the chamber, then we would have had a different response.
How does the chamber help a system to seems like the whole world is bullish on St. Pete except for Tampa Bay Rays.
Well, that's what we, yeah.
Old may live here, and Mr. Silverman may live here, but the principal owner, Stuart Sternberg, doesn't.
Right.
And that's the complete opposite of what Jeff.
That's why we gotta, you know, if you really want to woo the pretty girl, you gotta put on your nice shoes every day and keep wooing, baby.
Which one of us is the pretty girl?
Yeah,
though?
absolutely.
Or,
That's a good point. I think there's still a lot we could do as a community. I don't think that it's, again, I wish it was an easy one. I know that the Rays care about St. Pete and want it to work, and I know St. Pete cares and wants it to work too. That's why I'm optimistic going, you know, part of this is I think we're having the wrong discussion. And anytime you get to a point where you feel like there's nothing to talk here, when it's called a decisive moment, when you have an either or conversation, everybody should back up one step and go, what am I missing? If it's just either or, isn't there any other options we should be talking about? And that's all we're trying to do at the Chamber is go, we should be talking about these other options. This either or thing is not working right now for either of us. Let's go and step back and go, and this is personal, anytime you find yourself going, yeah, it's either this or that, you need to go, well, wait, what else are we missing here? And then that's where I think the creativity happens, and I think that's where we'll all find. I think we're all tired of the same conversation now, so let's move on to a new, wonderful, fresh conversation that we know both parties want to be successful, both want this thing, and let's make it happen.
Maybe we can get there with some new ownership.
Thank you. Thank you.